Today is expectation versus reality Premier League edition. The definition of a flop is this: it's something that fails miserably. And today we're going to be trying to find out which Premier League club has done just that. There may be more than one, of course. While some teams were destined for relegation at the start of the season, others donated £120 million to Germany, hoping that was going to stroll them to a Premier League title. Apologies, Chelsea, but it hasn't quite worked out that way. All jokes aside though, this was a fantastic episode of the podcast to make and a really enjoyable one, and hopefully you enjoy it as well. Please do leave a like and subscribe to the channel. We're 195 subscribers right now, only 5 away from the big 200, so surely there's 5 of you that are watching this right now that aren't subscribed, so please be part of the journey. Please hit that subscribe button, it would mean a lot, and like I said, give your thoughts of this debate in the comments down below. I'll be replying to all of those as per usual. Today it's very simple. We're going to be ranking every Premier League club based on their expectation and the reality of their campaign. So yeah, it's very simple. There's 6 categories, 20 Premier League clubs, of course, but let's not mess about. Let's get straight into it. We're going to start off with Burnley. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this episode of the podcast. So let's start off then with Burnley, the first team that we can see. So let's kick straight off then with them. Of course, Sean Dyche, the manager at Burnley, the manager at Turf Moor. What do we expect of Burnley going into this season? I think we expected what we've seen, really. A team that knows how they play under a manager, and every single season you think, that's not a very good transfer window. Are they going to have enough to stay up? Have they got the necessary players? Have they got the necessary skills to stay up? And it always comes down to that same philosophy that Sean Dyche uses, that so many teams, that they just get results. They get results, and enough results to stay in the league, and they've done it again this season. They started off at the start of the season on the ropes. They looked like they weren't going to get enough points. They looked like this may be the season where they go down, but they've done it. They will stay up, it looks like. You know, there are far more worse teams below them and even above them, I'd say, that are worse than Burnley, and they've done it. They've stayed up under Sean Dyche. He doesn't get the backing that a lot of teams do get. He doesn't get the backing that I think Sean Dyche deserves, but he gets the best out of the players, and that's the most important thing. And sometimes I think a manager that can do that, you know, that really shows his qualities. We look at some of the best managers in the world. They're the best managers in the world because they get the players they want. I'm not saying Sean Dyche is by anywhere near the best manager in the world, but he's got to have a lot of respect put on his name because he's getting the best out of a team that, you know, he's getting the best out of a squad that isn't really the best football inside, but he knows how to play with them and he knows how to get the best out of them. So for you and for Burnley, I think they're going in that expected category. They finished where I expected them to. They didn't get relegated. I didn't think they would get relegated, and I don't know about you, but I think that's a fair place to put them in that category. Next up then, Wolverhampton Wanderers, a team that are very difficult and are also very almost polar opposite to the situation with Burnley off the pitch in terms of the backing and the support that the manager gets, and how incredible Wolves have just gone from a championship side of 5 years ago, and now we expect them to be competing in the Europa League, you know, really pushing maybe even the top 4 eventually. And I think they can still do that. That hasn't been the season that, you know, that we all expected, and I will put them in the minor flop category early on. I think, and I will explain as to why. It's because I think we have a lot of expectation, a high expectation for Wolves. I think we do expect Wolves to be better than they have done this season. I think that is frustrating from a Wolves point of view, and a weird one to sort of look at. We look at the way, and we spoke about backing a lot, and we speak about how well that they've done in terms of recruitment. And this season, again, they have done that. They brought in Nelson Semedo in the summer. They have brought in other players. Well, they did lose Diego Jota, of course, to Liverpool. But generally, we know the culture. We know the way that Wolves play. We also know the style of players they bring in. We know the nationality of players they bring in, of course, being Portuguese. We know what he wants to do. We know where he wants to go with this side. He hasn't been able to do it as well as they have done in previous seasons. This season in particular. However, I think they'll get there. I think with another good summer transfer window. I remember when Ruben Neves, for example, was, you know, he was wanted by so many European sides a few years ago, and Wolves in the Championship managed to pick him up, and Wolves got him because there's a project there, and Wolves is still a project. They're a team that are on the up in terms of the, you know, maybe not this season, they're not too much on the up, but generally as a project, as a scheme, they are on the up, and I think they're a real team to watch out for sort of as we go. And we know that it's not, you know, it's nothing new. This season though, they have dropped a standard, and that's why I think they're a minor flop, because I did expect better than Wolves, and, you know, mid-table and below mid-table isn't where I expect them to be, but I expect them to do better next season. But this season, I'd say they have been a minor flop. So, West Brom are jabbing, and of course, a team that do look like at this stage they're going to go down, and it's a shame, really. Of course, they had at the start of the season Bilic in charge. He was the man that got them up last season. However, they didn't have a great end of the season. I think he was already he was almost booking his way out of a place in the dugout at West Brom before this season started because of the end of last season. And as expected, he hasn't actually finished the season and didn't really get a lot of the season, the Premier League season, with West Brom, which for him is a shame. And I didn't really see too many West Broms too fussed about it. Maybe inside, and maybe now they look at the season, could they have stuck with him a little bit longer? They got that point, of course, at the Etihad at the start of the season, and that was definitely a big point and an extremely important point. If they were to stay up, I think that would be a point they look back on. Same with Anfield as well. They got that point there, so they have got some decent. They've got something decent out of some very, very difficult places to go against some top sides. But they do look like they're going to go down, and that is because they've struggled to get the results against the teams that they need to be winning against. They need to be getting something from, and that's the issue that they're in. We look at the new manager come in, of course, it's Allardyce. A lot of people have many different opinions on Sam Allardyce, but generally he's a manager that hasn't ever been relegated and haven't ever been relegated out of the Premier League in particular. So he was almost a man that it was a bit, it was sort of a safety barrier. We'll go with Sam Allardyce because of his history, and we know that he tends not to relegate Premier League sides. However, I think he might be relegating West Brom this season. I wouldn't say it's all his fault. They did have a start of the season that wasn't great, even though they did get a few points against some top sides. Generally, though, it is Sam Allardyce that had the majority of the season at West Brom. I expected them to go down, and I think they will go down. So that's why I'm going to put in that sort of expected category when we're looking at expectation versus reality, because I expected them to go down, and I think they will. Maybe for West Brom fans, and hopefully West Brom fans, they don't. But generally looking at it, I think they might, and I think that's it's difficult to look at West Brom's season because they've had a change in the dugout, they've had a change of things, but generally I think they might be relegated. I think that is looking quite likely anyway at this point. Anyway, Brighton, another very, very interesting. I think all of them are going to be very, very interesting, but Brighton's quite it's a bit strange because with Brighton they've had some really, really good wins and some really, really good performances for a lot of the season. They've had some players come into the team that we haven't seen for Brighton before. They've come in, they've had some injuries. Lamptey, of course, has been injured for quite a lot of the season. Ben White was on loan at Leeds and had a very, very impressive spell last season in the Championship. He's come back now, at Brighton, and generally impressed. He looks pretty decent. We expected that, and he has been a very, very good player to this Brighton side. They are a team, I think they have been sort of fighting for relegation and fighting to get out of that sort of situation. I wouldn't say they're fighting for relegation. I say they're fighting out of a relegation battle. I think that's the best way of putting it. And I'd say I expected that from them. I could maybe put them in underachieved because maybe they could have done a little bit better. Maybe with some of the players they brought in, and maybe some of the squad they've got. Adam Lallana coming in, I know he's getting on a little bit, but generally he's a very, very talented player. Maybe they've slipped a little bit, but generally I think they're not going to go down in my opinion. I'd say we expected that. I don't think anyone really expected Brighton to go down really. Maybe they were, but I didn't really see that. So yeah, I think they've done how I thought they would do, and maybe with Graham Potter playing some good football, we could see a real rise at Brighton. Another team to definitely look out for going forward and looking at the campaigns to come. Fulham then, the next team we've got here. A team, of course, that got promoted from the Championship into the Premier League this season, start of the season. A very, very successful Championship campaign, of course, in the playoffs. They won in the end against Brentford to get them into this league, back into the Premier League. I'd say they've expected another team that I'd say they've done how we expected. They could go down, but I don't think they will. I sense a Newcastle relegation and a Fulham survival. I think that's what I'm feeling right now. Newcastle are in a real slump, and Fulham generally play some really, really good football. They've got a good squad. They've got a very, very good manager. I think that is one for the future. I think I think Fulham are on the up. If they stay up, I think it could be a little bit of a Villa. I think it could be a bit of Villa this season. They stay up, they invest, they have a good window, and that's where I think they could be. That's where their success could come from. They have to stay up this season, though. I definitely put them in my Premier League predictions. I definitely thought at the start of the season, I don't know about you, but I thought that they may go down, but I think they're going to sort of be in that region of, they're definitely not going to be rock bottom. I think they might be sort of lingering between sort of the 18th and the 17th, the 16th, sort of in that area. And that's, I think, probably where they probably will finish. I think they'll probably finish 17th, just survive. I'd say they've done how we expected. I don't know about you, of course. Keep leaving your thoughts down below of how you agree with me or your thoughts as well. I'll be reading and responding to all of them as per usual. But yeah, I think Fulham have done how we expected. Southampton then, another very interesting one, but very, very good manager, of course. Hassan, I say good manager. I mean, we look at him. You know, he plays a good style of play. I enjoy watching Southampton. I think they play a good brand of football. They've got some good players. They've got the Danny Ings. They've got the Ward-Prowses. They've got the Vestergaards at the back. They've got, generally a really, really good squad. And a team that, with, a good run of form and with confidence, I think could be a real team to watch out for. We saw at the start of the season, they beat Liverpool 1-0. Danny Ings, another player that we've already mentioned there, but that is now looking to maybe move in the summer, and I don't think that would have happened if Southampton had sort of stayed, and injuries have affected them. But if they'd kept that run of form and sort of kept the confidence that they had at the start of the season, they started quite well, but they're on a real slump. They're in a real sort of bad patch of form, and that's disappointing from a Southampton point of view. And they do now find themselves below mid-table as of recording. So at the moment, you look at Southampton very, very differently. If this was done sort of a few months ago when they're on that great run after beating Liverpool sort of in that sort of Christmas New Year period, I think you'd be saying they've probably overachieved and definitely done how we expected. Maybe I think overachieved probably where they would go. But now, after a really bad really bad run of form, some injuries here and there, and 9-0 defeat once again, this time to Manchester United, I think the season is going to be looked at very, very differently. So for that reason, I am going to put them in underachieved. But you look at the squad, and that could cause a bit of controversy, but I think generally they have underachieved. You look at the players they've got, you look at the manager with a lot of potential. He's an inexperienced manager. He is an experienced manager, and he has dealt with setbacks. You talk about the 9-0 defeat last season. He's come back. He's built a squad that I think is really, really good and has a lot of potential there, and with work could be a really, really good squad. But again, this season they have sort of found a difficult run of form. That could be difficult. They did obviously beat Arsenal pretty recently in the FA Cup, but we're looking at the Premier League in particular. I think that's important with stress. We're looking at the Premier League season, taking away the competitions. This is all about the Premier League. So for that point and for that situation, I think Southampton have underachieved, but I think they're sort of the top end of that category, maybe pushing to expected. But generally, with that squad, I expect a little bit better. Chelsea then. A very, very interesting one. I think I've said that to every single one of them. But I think Chelsea, again, is another outstanding... They had an outstanding January summer transfer window. They brought in a lot of players, some of them on higher fees than others. And some, they built a really, really good squad. However, did they build a really, really good squad? Or did they sort of over-cramp that squad? Did they bring in too many players? Did they spend too much money? They had Frank Lampard at the start of the season. He finished in top four, really focusing on the youth, focusing on the youngsters, focusing on that side of the football club. And he's now been given a lot of money. It's the first time he's been in a position where he can spend big, and he certainly took that opportunity. But that could, come back. No, it did come back to haunt him. He's been sacked. He's out of a job. However, was that all Frank Lampard's fault? How many of those players did Frank Lampard want? I know that's not really a discussion of this episode of the podcast. However, it definitely has got to be taken into consideration. I'd say they've underachieved slightly. I mean, that category, again, is a little bit vague. And I think when we look at that category, I think slight underachievement is the way to go. And I think they have slightly underachieved. We expected them to definitely be closing the gap between last season's finish and whoever's at the top spot. This time it's City, last season it's Liverpool. They had a very, very good season to finish in the top four, given the transfer ban and given the circumstances of the football club. But this season, after paying that much money and spending that much money, yeah, they had a transfer ban. They are sort of making up for the money they didn't spend. However, they did bring in a lot of players. They did bring in some quality players with a lot of potential that could fulfil that and could turn out to be good players. But right now, it's all about right now and what this season offers for them. I think they have slightly underachieved. That's why I've put them in that category, and I think that's fair. Disagree with you? Please don't dislike the video to disagree. Do give it a like, but give your reasoning why. I'd say slight disagreement, slight underachievement for Chelsea. I'll be interested to hear your thoughts. But for me, underachievement I think is probably fair. For Leeds, I think another very... Again, another team that's been promoted from the Championship last season. Finally, they're back in the league. They're back in the top flight of English football. A lot of pressure on them to stay in the league. There's a lot of pressure with Bielsa playing this very, very risky style of football that's a very, very great to watch. It's a really, really good brand to watch. But they do concede a lot of goals, and I think that's the reason why it probably has let them down a little bit. I wouldn't say it's down to players. I think that's down to the style of play. They do play with gaps that, such wide gaps at the back, and I think that has affected them. But they've scored goals. They've generally finished in a very, very comfortable position. They're definitely not going to get relegated. There's no doubt about that. I don't think they're going to be fighting for European football at the end of the season now. But they've definitely sustained themselves in the league. They've got to become a sustainable English, comfortable Premier League side. And I think this season they have done that. I don't think they've finished. They could go down next season, but with backing, with players and coming in the summer next season, another team I think they got to be careful of. A lot of teams they've got to be careful of next season. So for Leeds, I'm going to put them in expected. I didn't expect them to go down. I didn't expect them to be in a relegation, but I expected them to do quite well because they did, they spent some money. They spent quite a lot of money for a team that's just been promoted, and their style of play is very, very good. They've got a really good manager as well. I'd say they've expected. It's probably top end expected, maybe even overachieved, but generally they've done a very, very good job, and Bielsa has as well, of course. Leicester City then, the next team, of course, Brendan Rodgers, the head manager there. I was going to say head coach, but I think he is officially the manager there. I don't exactly know the name of his job, Rob, but he is the manager in my eyes, and he's a very, very good manager. I can see in the years to come going back to a team, in your so-called top six, or have Leicester already named themselves as the new top six. We talk about the so-called top six: the Arsenals, the Liverpools, the Cities, the Chelseas, the Spurs, the Manchester United. Is that all of them? I may have missed one more. There's six there, but I might have repeated myself. But I think that's all of them. But Arsenal, I know we're not talking about Arsenal. We will come on to them. But are Arsenal in your so-called top six anymore? I don't know if they are. Have Leicester taken their spot because they're a team now, in the last few years they won the league a few years ago, but generally now they are consistently finishing in the top six. Last season they bottled it a little bit. Come the end of the season, after lockdown, they finished in the Europa League. They definitely should have finished in the Champions League, but this season I think they probably will finish top four. They're looking very comfortable there. They had a very, very good transfer window. They're bringing in the right players. They're selling players on them when they do, like Chilwell. They're getting big money for them. They did the same for Harry Maguire as well. They're getting good money and they're bringing the right players in. And Brendan Rodgers could be a manager that we see maybe at Arsenal, maybe at Tottenham in years to come. You don't know. However, he's a good manager that is doing something very, very good at Leicester, and I think they will get Champions League. And for that reason, I think they have overachieved. Maybe not. I don't mean that in a negative way. I think they probably have overachieved because they're a team that we probably expected them to be in the top six, but they're comfortably in top four. So that's why I think they're in that overachieved category. And so then, for Manchester City, the league leaders, and I definitely think they'll go on and win the Premier League this season. We expected them to be challenging and doing much better than they did last season. They finished second in the end last year, but generally they weren't as good as Liverpool. No one was as good as Liverpool, but City, we expected them to definitely put a better fight than they did last season. And they have done that, and they've done that by a long, long way. Liverpool are nowhere to be seen in their eyes, and they look like they're going to go and win back the Premier League title after losing it last season to Liverpool. And it's coming back to the Etihad. It looks like, and Pep Guardiola, again, there's a few leaks, in areas they needed to definitely strengthen and solve. I think in the summer transfer window, and they've definitely gone and done that. Ruben Diaz coming in, the revival of John Stones as well. You talk about Ake, we haven't seen much of him, but Torres as well, Ferran Torres from Spain. Generally, a lot of players coming in, but not too many, not a Chelsea amount, but definitely a group of players that are fitting the style of play, and definitely a team that I think we expected them to be putting up a fight. They've certainly done that, as I said. They look like they are going to now and win the Premier League title. We expected that. Maybe it's an overachievement, but I don't think it is. They spent a lot of money. I'd say they've done what we expected them to do. We expect them to be closing the gap, putting in a good fight. They've certainly done that. They've won the fight. They're going to win the league. I'd say we expected that to happen. Maybe we didn't expect them to comfortably win the league like I think they will do. But, we expected them to be putting up a fight. And like I said, they've won that battle and they look like they're going to go and win the league. So that's where I'm going to put Manchester City. Manchester United then, from the blue side of Manchester to the red. Another really, really interesting one. And I'm really, really interested to see what you people think. And I'm not doing this as a live one, of course this is a video, but in the comments down below, really get a discussion going, because United's a really, really strange one. Because you talk about the summer transfer window they had, we look at the players they've brought in. The players they brought in haven't really affected the season for Manchester United at all. We look at Donny van der Beek. He hasn't got a look in. He hasn't played enough games, in my opinion. He's a really talented player. He's an ex. When he was at Ajax, he was a Champions League semi-finalist. He's proven. He's a Dutch international. He looks to be, when he has been playing, looks like he's got something about him. With minutes and Ollie giving him the time, I think he probably can live to that potential. But he needs the opportunity that he hasn't been given. Alex Telles, another one as well. I'd say Alex Telles has probably been the best signing. Not really what he's done in a Man United shirt, but, well, I mean, he has done it in a Man United shirt, but what I mean is he's done sort of on the pitch, playing first team football. What he's actually done is push Luke Shaw to go on and be one of the best left-backs in the Premier League this season. And for an England fan, that's brilliant. We've got a great left-back, and we've got a great variety and a great selection of options going into the Euros. And Luke Shaw, we always thought he was a player that was a few, was that little bit away from being very, very good. And this season we found that sort of last piece of the puzzle to go and show that, and he's done that this season. And that probably is the push and that sort of first team competition with Alex Telles. But other than that, Diallo came in January, but that was agreed in the summer. Other players as well. Is that it? Was that all they did? I think Cavani. Sorry, that's the one I'm missing. Cavani. I mean, he has made an impact, I guess, but he's been injured for a lot. I'd say he has been effective. I'd say he has, but generally, no one's sort of been taken this season, with two hands and grabbed it and taken United somewhere very, very special. I'd say they've done how expected. They're second in the league. We spoke about them being their expectation, closing the gap between where they are and top spot. It was being Liverpool last season. This time it's being their rivals City, but generally, they are quite a few points away from the top spot. They have dropped points, losing to Sheffield, losing to Crystal Palace at the start of the season. These games, drawing to Sheffield, drawing to Crystal Palace, obviously away as well. Dropping points against teams you expect United to be winning. That's why they're not where they are, where they want to be, of course, fighting for titles like they were, under the Fergie days, and really sort of fighting, not coming second, because coming second sounds like they are, but, coming second, but in an actual title race. Because United were in a title race for a little bit, but they're certainly not now, and City will go on and win it. So I'd say they've done what we expected them to do. Maybe they slightly overachieved because they're in second, but have they really overachieved? Because they've got a good squad of players, and with backing and with Ollie getting the players they maybe want, maybe they could have overachieved, and maybe they could have given a real battle to City. But at this point, I don't really know. I think expected's quite fair. But definitely give your thoughts, United fans, in the comments. Next up then, Sheffield United, a team that last season surprised and definitely defied odds, and definitely we all thought were probably the standout team of last season. Chris Wilder got a great team and a really, really, maybe, on paper weren't fantastic players, but got a really, really good style of play. The overlapping centre-backs that worked so well for Sheffield United last season. This season, it just hasn't clicked at all. Chris Wilder's gone. They're definitely going down. They haven't got enough, anywhere near enough points to stay in this league, and they're rock bottom by quite a few points. And they only got, 3 points in their first sort of 10 games. They were in a real state. They were in a real situation where it was not a good place to be, Sheffield United. And for fans, I think it's quite a good job they weren't there, because I think that place could be, probably weren't going to be too happy with the season they've had. And for that reason, I mean, obviously this is based on expectation, obviously against reality. It's the name of the game. It's the name of the game. It's the name of the video and the episode of the podcast. But, did we expect, they are going to go and complete flop, but I'll explain as to why they may not have been. Because we didn't really expect them to go on and do the season they did last season. We didn't really expect them to go, because they maybe were a little bit of a one-season wonder. When they started being sussed out and when that was going to happen, what was going to happen to Sheffield United, when their sort of tactics and when the philosophy and when the culture was going to be sussed out, and when Chris Wilder's overlapping centre-back technique, teams worked out how to defend it and stop that, it was probably going to crumble, and it has done, unfortunately. I do think they're a complete flop generally, because they haven't got enough points at all. They've been pretty horrific. They haven't got enough results at all. They have been an absolutely awful side, really, to watch and probably to support. But last season they were so good, and this season they've been so bad, that I'd say they're a complete flop based on really last season. They could have been a minor flop because we didn't expect them to do as well this season as they did last season, but generally the points is bad. They have had a very, very bad season. That's why I think they're in that category. For Newcastle then, Newcastle United, a team that Mike Ashley, as the owner there and the chairman there, a lot of this season for Newcastle generally started decent, and the summer was okay. I mean, they brought in Ryan Fraser free from Bournemouth. They brought Callum Wilson from Bournemouth as well. They brought in some decent players, Hendricks as well from Burnley. But they brought in some decent players, and it looked like at one point they were going to do what Steve Bruce intended to do, which was definitely not get them relegated and maybe not even be in a relegation battle. But now, the way they're going and the form they're on, I think they definitely are in a relegation battle, and I think they are going to be going down at this point. They're not down now, they're not in the relegation zone. Fulham are still there, but Fulham, if they start finding some form and Newcastle carrying the way they're going, they're going to be in deep trouble. So for Newcastle, I think they have been a minor flop because they've brought in some decent players. The club is run badly. You know, we look at Mike Ashley and the takeover not helping them at all. And I do feel really bad for Newcastle because we always think that takeover could happen. We talk about that takeover, getting Mike Ashley out of the club, him selling the club, and new chairman coming in, backing Steve Bruce, maybe even sacking Steve Bruce and bringing another manager, but generally changing the way the club's run. But minor flop for Newcastle is probably fair. If they do go down, they spent a lot of money on Callum Wilson. I think it was 20-30 million pounds. They've got decent players here and there. Generally not a great squad at all, but you know they've spent money and they've definitely got a better squad than some. So I think minor flop's kind of fair there. Liverpool. And they're going to... the fall of Liverpool this season has been very, very difficult watch, I guess, from a Liverpool point of view. And I think it's been quite an interesting watch for neutrals like myself, because we saw Liverpool being the absolute force of last season. They were incredible. They were ripping teams apart. They were just ripping them apart, walking away, not even looking back. They were absolutely ruthless. They were clinical in all areas. They were defensively absolutely solid. And this season, they've been the complete opposite. They haven't scored enough goals, and they've been wide open at the back. They've been a Poppadom defence, I like to call it. They've been blown over, walked over. You know, that's the best way of putting it. And it's a shame. They've had injuries. I don't think it should all be blamed on injuries, but they have had a lot of injuries. We talk about centre-backs being a huge issue for Liverpool. Van Dijk getting an injury. Joe Gomez getting an injury. A lot of players being injured and a lot of crucial players being injured at Liverpool. And that's definitely going to be a reason why I don't think that they've had a good enough season. And they do find themselves now hunting for European football. When we talk about Liverpool last season, you'd be laughed at if you mentioned hunting for European football. But they are. The reality of it is they are hunting for a European football now, whether that be Europa League, whether that be Champions League, I'm not sure. But I think they might finish in the Europa League. But generally, I don't know, because they are quite a few points away. And they've got to find some form. They're doing quite well in the Champions League. But remember, this is Premier League based only. And if we're looking at that, they've been a complete flop. We see the contrast of last season to this season. It just hasn't been good enough at Anfield. And for Liverpool, home and away. Crystal Palace then, the next team to talk about. Crystal Palace under Roy Hodgson. I'd say they've done quite. They've done how we expected them to go. I think that's the best way of putting it. Not too much to talk about really with Crystal Palace. They brought in Eze from QPR. They brought in some decent players. They kept hold of Zaha. Of course, it's always a challenge for them, but they've done that and they've brought in some decent players. They lost a few, but generally they've strengthened the squad. They lost heavily to Liverpool in this season, but generally they're safe. They're not going to be pushing for anything higher than mid-table and sort of in that region. So yeah, expected is probably fair for the Seagulls. For Everton then, the Toffees. A very, very good transfer window. Ancelotti definitely getting the players that they want, definitely bringing in the players that he wanted to bring in to turn Everton into the powerhouse that he intends to turn them into. We talk about Allen, we talk about Decore, we talk about James Rodriguez as well, and you add that to a squad already including the likes of Richarlison, the likes of adding Godfrey, Sigurdsson already there as well, Pickford, Mina, these players that are a really, really talented squad of players, a really, really talented group of players and boys that I think definitely with a bit more time under Ancelotti, a bit more coaching, with a bit more gelling period, I think they definitely will be competing for Europa League. Maybe, I don't know, they'll compete for Europa League this season, so I think they've definitely overachieved. Because they brought in players, but just because you bring in these players doesn't mean they're all going to gel and work, and they are probably they are finishing in a really, really good position, and we could see them with in the seasons to come if they do keep Ancelotti, which they definitely should do. He's a fantastic manager for Everton. I think probably pushing for Champions League football, and this season they did very, very well in the transfer window, and that's why I think they've overachieved. Because they've done better than that. They've, like I said, they can bring in these great players, but they've got to prove it. They've got to gel, and they have done. And that's what I like about Everton. Another team to watch out for. Another great project that's working for Everton. Aston Villa. Interesting one for Aston Villa, isn't it? Because Aston Villa were a team that last season only just stayed up. On the final day, that point against West Ham was the one that kept them up. Grealish, of course, has been injured for sort of as of recording and has been now for a few games, and you have sort of seen that drop off in performance from Aston Villa. But generally, at the start of the season and for the majority of the season, I'd say up to this point, they've been a really, really good side and a team to watch out for, and a team that's been causing problems across positions in the league table, from some of the best teams, as you'd say, arguably some of the worst teams. They've been beating the teams they should be a lot of the time and shocking a lot of teams that you didn't maybe expect them to beat. And that is what I like about this Aston Villa team. They had a very, very good summer transfer window. They brought in some great players, the eyes of Watkins from Brentford, Traore from Lyon. Some really, really, really good players that have added to what is now a very, very healthy, good squad at Aston Villa. Injuries haven't helped them. Their main man, Grealish, of course, signed the contract in the summer as well, which is a huge boost for them if they can keep hold of him, which I think they probably will, because they're going to be asking for a lot of money, and fair enough, he's a great player. You would be asking for a high price tag and a really, really big fee, so I think they probably will keep hold of him. If they can keep him fit and keep their main man, Jack Grealish, fit, healthy and in form, they're another team that I think next season, with a bit more and a few more additions, definitely could be pushing for more of the season, and definitely pushing, like we saw at the start of the season, for a longer time. So for me, they've overachieved. They've brought in some good players, and they've had a very, very good season. Tottenham then. Tottenham Hotspur. It's for me, Tottenham are between a minor flop and a complete flop, really. They're a team with Jose Mourinho that he was backed. He was backed and got the players he wanted in the summer. Gareth Bale coming back as sort of a fairy tale. They're definitely not going to go in fairy tale season, but that's a fairy tale transfer for him coming back to Tottenham. Again, they're bringing in players that Jose Mourinho players, the Højbjergs from Southampton, Carlos Vinicius on loan, but I think maybe that might be permanent. I don't know. It is loan now, but I don't know whether they make that permanent. But anyway, they've brought in very Jose players that you maybe thought, and at the start of the season, they were definitely looking like they could win the league, which sounds mental now, but at that point, they were really up there. For a lot of the season, they were fighting and pushing, but they've had a real drop-off now. They're 8th in the league table as of recording. They've been absolutely bummed out of the Europa League, which is not good at all. They're out of that completely against the team that they definitely shouldn't be losing to, and that's a shame for Tottenham. For me, Tottenham, they're a complete flop, really. They're complete. So then, Arsenal, another team that I think has there's a real interest around Arsenal, and I think there'll be a lot of discussion in the comments down below as where we'd put Arsenal. But I am going to put them in complete flop, but with a bit of remorse, because with Arsenal, they're in a transition period, and fair play to them. I mean, they have stuck with Arteta. A lot of teams probably would have got rid of a manager if they're in that sort of form. I mean, there was even some joke mention of them being relegated. They were never going to get relegated, but they were losing to Burnley at home. They've lost to some silly teams they just shouldn't be losing to, and they're in mid-table. They're a team that have such great history, and the reality is they are a long way away from where they want to be and from where they were. However, like I said, they're in a transition period. They've stuck with Arteta, and they believe that with time, with transfers, with a bit more coaching here and there, that they will be able take Arsenal, and Mikel Arteta will be able to take Arsenal to the next level and take them hopefully back to where they want to be. That's the dream, that's the hope there. However, this season, if we're looking at this season, we can look at where they think they can look at the projects and think they'd be much higher, but this isn't talking about project, this isn't talking about the future, this is talking about now. And right now, Arsenal are in the mid-table. Are they part of this top 6 anymore? They're not. The reality is they're not. I actually don't mind Arsenal. I think I quite like them. I'm a neutral looking in. I don't mind Arsenal. I like the history. I like the ex-players they've had. The Teir Henrys, the Vieiras, these fantastic players. But generally this season has not been good enough. And if it is a transition period, if it is just a year or a year and a half until we sort of see them really making big changes and see them pushing up the league table, then fair enough. But right now it's not good enough. And I think that's the position that they're in. So for me, they're a complete flop. However, there is movement, and I think with time, like I said, there could be some serious changes. But for me, right now, they're in complete flop. But I understand, I'm sure there'll be a lot of controversy down in the comments down below. So please do give me your thoughts as per usual there. So the first team to go in that fairy tale season category, the only team that are going to be in there, is West Ham. They have been fantastic this season, haven't they? We talk about a team that didn't have a very good summer transfer window at all. David Moyes, the manager, who deserves so much credit, was criticised and has been criticised for just not being good enough at this level, and he's proved to be a good manager. As we now always, we know he can't be criticised as great. What he's done at West Ham is absolutely fantastic. The players that he's brought in have just been very, very good and have fitted West Ham and fitted David Moyes perfectly. And I think that's why they've done so well. They've sort of moved away from bringing the players in like the Jalmarez, the Arnautovic's, the players that think they may be better than West Ham. And they've just gone for players that, you know, they've gone for the players that I'd say maybe, you know, they want to go to West Ham, they want to work at West Ham, they want to really sort of give everything for West Ham, and then maybe go on and move on. They're sort of using West Ham a little bit to sort of go and get a better career. I don't think Soucek's going to be at West Ham for the rest of his career. I think he probably can go on and play for a bigger team, but does he want to? Because West Ham are proving that they're a very, very good side, another project, another very, very good team that look like they're going to finish in Europa League, which is absolutely fantastic. They've been incredible this season. Soucek, Rice, Jesse Lingard coming in January. Generally, they've been a very, very good side. I think they definitely have had a fairy tale season. So many West Ham fans, and certainly myself as well, not even as a West Ham fan, but as a neutral looking in, I was worried about West Ham. I was worried about them because they didn't have a good window, a summer transfer window at all. They looked like they definitely lost, they lost a few players and didn't bring enough in. They didn't really have a good enough squad, I didn't think, but they've proved that they do. They've proved, the players have proved, and the club have proved. Moyes has definitely proved that this team has enough and more than enough, way more than enough, and in the end enough to go on and finish in the Europa League. So fair play to West Ham, fair play to David Moyes. That's the tier list I've gone with: expectation versus reality, Premier League edition. Hopefully you agree. If you don't agree, please don't disagree. Dislike the video. Give it a like, but in the comments down below, give it a little discussion. Give me your thoughts as well. As always, I'll be responding to all of them. And hopefully you've enjoyed it. Hopefully you do leave a like and subscribe for new as well. We're only 4 away from 200 subscribers, so please, there's surely 4 of you. Surely 4 of you that are watching this right now aren't subscribed, so please do. And hopefully we can hit 200 subscribers after this video. I've been Jack. This has been the Young Fan Podcast. Like I said, leave a comment down below giving your thoughts, and hopefully you've enjoyed it. I'll see you later.